Hello and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, I'll be discussing the last of the original Candyman sequels, the third movie in the series, the 1999 supernatural slasher Candyman Day of the Dead, as directed by Turi Meyer, and the follow-up to the second movie in the series, 1995's Candyman Farewell to the Flesh. The movie sees the return, once again, of the infamous Candyman, as reprised by Todd, the spirit of an artist, Daniel Robitaille, who lived in the late 19th century and who was persecuted and gruesomely killed for loving and having a child to the daughter of a rich landowner. Legend then says that the Candyman will then appear to those who call his name 5 times in front of a mirror, only then to be brutally slain as he exacts his pound of flesh. In Day of the Dead, we now follow Candyman's last living descendant, Caroline McKeever, as played by Donna Adair-Rios, the daughter of Annie Tarrant, who was the protagonist from the second movie in the franchise. Set some 25 years following the events of the second movie, Caroline is now an adult and living in Los Angeles, but is haunted by visions of the Candyman and her past. Spurred on by one of her friends, Miguel Velasco, as played by Mark Adair-Rios, who's opening a gallery to display Daniel Robitaille's work of art, and in knowing Caroline's heritage and connection to the Candyman himself, in a veiled attempt to put the past behind her, Caroline is coaxed to call out to the Candyman on the gallery's opening night. Needless to say, Caroline soon finds out that the Candyman is indeed real, and now has set his sights on her as his next victim, to join him in the afterlife by his side, to which she must succumb and believe in his legend to give herself to him freely. One by one, history starts to repeat itself as her friends fall foul of the Candyman's wrath, and Caroline is framed for their murders, and once again, as he slowly invades her mind, she must find a way to rid her family of this curse for good. So, immediately you can tell that the production values and integrity to the Candyman legacy simply fell off a cliff with this movie. Our opening scene kicks us right into the kind of movie this is, with a dream sequence involving a bikini model in a tight top, panties and no bra. Sets the scene. Classy. In this entry, Candyman's transition from stylized emblem for despair and desperation to a generic run-of-the-mill slasher is now complete and starkly deviates from the atmosphere and presence of the first two movies, for as much as the second one had, to bring us an abomination in itself. A generic, low-budget offering with the Candyman cut and pasted in between gratuitous publicity shots of its main protagonist. In fact, I did lose count of the amount of times we were told just how beautiful she was. I mean, okay, we get it. She was a Playboy playmate, and indeed, in Baywatch. So that goes without question. But it wasn't essential to the story, and it certainly didn't have to be iterated and iterated. Once we had the initial low-grade dream sequence and we cut away to the titles, it did seem like we might have turned a corner and carried on with such promise. A nicely gruesome title sequence with imagery of a rusty blood-stained hook turning to an electro-beat theme. Not quite in keeping with the previous two entries, but presenting a distinctly gothic horror vibe, and certainly enough to kind of whet the appetite. But then, like I said, it just falls off a cliff. The whole thing plays like an entry into a soap opera, in which it would have been better placed. Candyman, The Days of Our Lives. It has that kind of glary, episodic feel, quite patchy and less focused than even its direct predecessor. And the music doesn't help here either. Gone are the edgy and tragically playful themes from Philip Glass, which kind of echoed to the Candyman's tragic origins, and instead we have music befitting a shopping mall elevator. There's no one singular theme and nothing to kind of spark inspiration, anticipation, or even fear in the viewer. You can tell instantly that the production values are a lot lower, even by the standards of the second instalment. At least that had some residual atmosphere, you know? This is simply poorly executed throughout, and so clearly with the wrong people involved, both behind and in front of the camera. That is all but Tony Todd. Once again, for me, he totally smashes the role. It is the only redeeming quality of this movie. It's the only one it has. But for as much as I love the scenes with the Candyman, they do seem to be out of place against the light, dazzling cinematography of the rest of the movie, such that one might need to wear sunscreen just to watch it. But joking apart, the scenes with the Candyman, or rather Tony Todd, in those scenes as the Candyman, are better than ever, in my opinion. I think the use of the Candyman himself is spurious at best, and leaning far too much on him as a generic slasher. There isn't enough emotion from the supporting cast to make any of it believable, intense, or provide the right kind of atmosphere. But the scenes are still pretty cool, especially as he makes his grand entrance. The film just doesn't mesh well, either within itself or with the other movies within the franchise. Sure, Daniel Robitaille's backstory is pretty much the same, but the visuals are out of kilter with those in the second movie, and indeed, after the events of the second, we have no rationale or no explanation for how the Candyman was able to return. We're only 3 movies in, and things are getting really sloppy. Even the reason Caroline calls forth the Candyman is weak. I mean, talk about giving in to peer pressure, you know? There's simply not a strong enough reason why, after all that time, she would cave and call him forth at an art gallery. There's no preamble, no fixation on the legend. At least in the previous movies, his victims had become so obsessed with the legend, with the story, and the ideology. The first 2 movies also delved into a number of racial issues prevalent at the time, and still indeed poignant today. The first more so, the sequel, Tiptoed, but this simply results to offering a number of racial slurs and a twisted bent cop who hates everybody but himself. All just so contrived and indeed very irritating. There's nothing of meaning here, no undertones, no subtext, no insightful imagery or power behind any of its so-called messages. Furthermore, the original had an almost erotic vibe without actually trying, and minimal sexual content. This goes the other way and has no erotic feel, despite being plastered with nudity. In this, it goes somewhere to kind of diminishing the power the original had even further. The original story was about the strength of love between Daniel and Caroline. The original one, of course, you know, a story of passion, not lust. However, this movie turns it on its head to become more generic filler. Overall, this seemed like a cheap and tacky excuse to put Adair-Rios in front of a camera with some Candyman scenes tacked on to call it a horror. She was by far the wrong choice for this, making it feel more like a soap opera than giving it the performance and emotional gravity that the Candyman deserved. The production values are poor. The only thing of any worth, and indeed, well, was indeed Tony Todd reprising his role as the Candyman once more. But even then, this felt out of place, given the overall tone and the setting of the movie. With a bunch of characters we really couldn't care less about, you know, and with more tacky jump scares and enough cheap pot shots at our expense than I can shake a rusty hook at, I think it's sad that the Candyman's original legacy came to this. It's all just way too overcooked. Disappointing. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, and other movie-related content. Absolutely loved having here at SciFirst MovieTalk, and definitely love to have you back. But most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.